All right, Rambam Sefer Misvot Aseh, positive commandment. Last Misvah that we read was Misvah number Kof Mem Zayin, number 147. We spoke about talking about some of the other offerings and gifts to the Kohen from the animal, Zeruah Karayim, the Haba, stomach, forearm, and cheek. Then the Reshit Hagez, the first of the shearings goes to the Kohen, the Haramim, the pledged assets goes to the Kohen. And then that got us into Behemah related Mizvot. So namely the Mizvah of doing Shahita properly, followed by the Mizvah of Kisui Hadam, of covering the blood following Shahita, only of a Hayah, of a non-domesticated animal, and often a bird. And that brings us to another animal-related Mizvah, and then we're going to segue into Kashrut Mizvot. So Mizvah Kof Mem Het, number 148. He shesivan l'shloah hakan. We have a Mizvah to send away when we encounter a nest with a mother bird and hovering over its eggs or its young, and we are going to want to partake in its eggs or its young, obviously for the sake of food. And we have a mizvah to send away that mother bird first. It's talking about something that's not privately owned. And the pasuk that tells us this, of course, in the beginning of Parashat Kiteseh, send away the mother bird and take the children. Very interesting mizvah, a lot of discussion, ideas, concepts that attach to it. As are most laws of kashrut, this is a law that's, you can say it's a kashrut law because it's talking about a protocol being able to partake of certain kosher birds, is also in Masechet Hulin. Next mizvah, Kof Mem Ted, number 149. He shesivanu libdok b'simane behema v'haya hashihutin. So we have a mizvah, as we said, now that we segue into the various laws of prohibited and permitted eating of animals, and we know that in general we'll call it the laws of kashrut. And this one is talking about, to lead us off, checking the signs on a behema or hayah shechutin, meaning any behema, livestock, domesticated or a non-domesticated animal, a hayah, that are eligible for shechita, for slaughtering. Meaning those are of the permissible species that we should check their signs to make sure that that's what they are. And of course, we know with the animals, they have to be both ma'ale gerah, chewing their cud, which means they have to have split hooves, with the toe not split all the way down, and only then will be allowed to partake of that species. That is a edible or permissible species for us to have. And the fact that we look at an animal, we inspect, we decide based on the physical signs given to us by the Torah that this is an eligible animal, that in and of itself was mizvat aseh, meaning again, following the protocol of how and what we can eat is fulfilling a positive commandment. And the pasuk tells us as the source, this is the animal that you're allowed to eat. Of course, in the case of a behemah and hayah, the Torah actually lists for us that which is prohibited and that which is permitted to eat. But also at the same time gives us those signs. Velashon Sefer, the Midrash says, Otaha tochelu. The pasuk in that mix in Parashat Emor that we're about to read, by the way, Parashat Shemini that we read a number of weeks ago, Parashat Shemini, In listing the animals, at one point it stops and says, "Otah tochero," this you should eat. The Midrash derives, "Otah ba'achila, ven behemah teme'ah ba'achila." This is for you to eat, as opposed to what we call a behem. The Torah lists as the behemah teme'ah. Roseh lomar. What the Midrash is trying to convey to us, says the Rambam, "Habehema shehiyu ba hasimanim ha'elu mutar lo'ochla v'yoreh bo shebehema she'en ba elu hasimanim ena moter ba'achila." Meaning, otah, this one, the behema that has the signs, the physical signs that I prescribe, that you can eat, and then by implication, by default, any behema that does not have them, you may not eat. Normally, that would be considered, as we mentioned before, a negative commandment that is derived from and implied from a positive commandment, which remains to usually only be a positive commandment, like one of our principles. And for that reason, after that statement, the Midrash continued and said, from this, I would only know that there's only a positive commandment to eat the behemah tehorah. How do I know it's a negative commandment transgression to eat a behemah teme'ah, as listed? The mulamar et hagamal v'chulei, and then the Torah goes on to list. We'll cover that obviously in the lo ta'aseh misvot. But the point is that it is a freestanding misvah lo ta'aseh to eat those other animals that don't have the signs, only because the Torah listed them, not because of the implication. But anyway, the moral from all of this is, Hine kevad mitba'er shamru otah tochel misvat aseh. That's why the Rambam, of course, brings this type of research and analysis, is just to prove and support the fact that what he's dealing with is indeed a mizvah. And we got from this midrash when it says, "Otah tochelo," this you shall eat, that it is a positive commandment to eat, to follow the protocol in eating a permissible behemah. And so that's the idea, to check the signs, see if they're present, and not eat without knowing that species has already been verified. That's the misvah. Both Masechet Cholin and Bechorot discuss the idea, but Cholin at length, of course, the permissible species of behemoth. Misvah Kufno number 150, nice number. Hisha Sivan Levdok B'Simaneh Ha'of Shiyu Kasad Minim Emenu Mutarim. Now, another category of living beings that we eat are birds. There's a Mizvat Aseh, says the Rambam, to check the signs of a bird, and that some of these species will be permissible to eat. Now, here's where it gets tricky. We don't know, the Torah does not instruct and guide us as to what are the signs that make a bird permissible to eat. So how do you know that? So what happens is that they'll call them the kosher signs, right? Come from our research by being able to analyze the birds that the Torah listed as prohibited, that we found certain common signs in these birds. There are 22 prohibited birds listed in the Torah. Those 22, they found the common signs, physical attributes in those birds that are distinct from other birds, and those became the simaneh of tameh. Those become the physical signs that tell you that the bird is prohibited to eat. Danin zeh tameh v'zeh tahor v'zeh mizvat aseh. So based on that, you can know that this bird is tameh. The Torah told me it's tameh, and that which does not have its attributes that we found common in all those 22 birds is a kosher bird. And when we are researching and distinguishing between the tameh and the tahor, the kosher and non-kosher birds, that itself is a positive commandment when I can discern and say, this is a bird that I can eat based on the signs that are learned from the list of non-tahor birds in the Torah. The Sefer, the Midrash says, Kol sipor tahor tochelu zo mizvat aseh. When the Torah says tochelu, eat a tahor bird, when we do so based on following the instructions, the implied instructions, that's a fulfillment of a positive command. And therefore, that which we hinted to, so to speak, in this mitzvah has been explained. Also, Masechet Hulin is where you can find the laws for this mitzvah. Mitzvah Kofnan Aleph, number 151. So you have behema and haya. You have alfot, you have birds. What else is kosher? Hagavim. Let's put them on the Bet Torah table and give them to Moakish. Grasshoppers. Grasshoppers are kosher. And we know that there are 5 types of kosher grasshoppers listed in the Torah. Checking their signs and verifying them to be the kosher species is a positive commandment. These signs are explicit in the Torah. For instance, it says it has to have jumping legs over its regular legs. Its wings have to cover most of its body. There are physical attributes that help us identify the 5 kosher grasshoppers. So it's the same nature of a mizvah like the previous ones. They're just following the Torah's guidelines, and by virtue of that, choosing what is allowable to eat is a positive commandment. And the pasuk that charges us with this says, these are the ones you can eat in the Torah list. After the Torah goes through the forbidden insects, etc., Torah lists the 5 permissible grasshoppers. The name is So of course, it's listed in Parashat Emor. I'm sorry, Shemini, I keep saying Emor. Shemini, but it's discussion as with the other kashrut laws as a Masechet Hulin Gemara. Mitzvah Kof Nun Bet, number 152, another good number. Now checking the signs, the physical attributes of the fish that make them kosher is another mitzvah, and these are also listed in the Torah Shebechtav. And the source for this in the Torah Shebechtav is Etzet Tochelu Mikol Asher B'Mayim. After telling us that the Sheres Hamayim is prohibited, but this type of fish is permissible to you in the water. So the Gemara tells us that if you have a dak tameh, a prohibited species of fish, you transgress on not fulfilling a positive commandment and violating a negative commandment. Because when Torah says this you can eat, I can imply anything but these is prohibited. And again, a negative that's implied from a positive is only a positive mitzvah. So that's why there has to be a specific pasuk telling me that eating a tameh fish is also a negative violation. What's the net result from that analysis? And then but now we know from Hachamim's discussion that when the Torah says it's this type of fish you shall eat, indeed is a fulfillment of a positive commandment. Ve'anyan bi'adnu zo mizvat aseh ma shezachati lecha. And how does this play out? That's what we mentioned in the previous misvot. When we have to discern the physical signs of fish, and we say, based on the signs that we know given from the Torah, which of course, what the Rambam is not telling us, but we know that it's snapid v'chaskeshet, the pins and scales, and therefore I'll discern which is prohibited and permitted. That is the Misvah, what that's fulfilling the Misvat Aseh. As the Torah tells us at the end of Parashat Shemini, and you shall discern and distinguish regarding Behemot between the Tahor and the Tameh. V'hivdaltem omnam tihiyeh b'siman. How do you differentiate? How do you discern? The Torah says lahavdil. That is only with the signs provided for us. V'lachen yeh kol min v'min marba'a elu haminim v'simanim misbah b'fnei asma. And therefore, just like the Torah says regarding behemah, you should separate and discern between the tahor and the tameh. So we know all of these four categories, meaning behemah hayaz 1, off 2, hagavim grasshoppers 3, dagim fish is 4. All of them is a independent positive commandment to follow those instructions. Kilomar simaneh behemah v'hayav obviously simaneh hagim v'dagim, the signs and physical attributes given to us by the Torah. Eating them or not eating them based on those. For each category of species, types of species, is following a Misvat Aseh from the Torah. We've already brought all the sources and terminologies from the Torah. And the laws of fish and their signs. Again, Masechet Cholin of Gemara. So these are all the Misvot listed of kashrut, as we said, by the Rambam. And with this, we'll stop today. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.